The Infinity 8 Killer is one of the most notorious and unsettling mysteries in Grand Theft Auto V, standing out because it is the game's only fully fleshed out serial killer subplot, albeit one that exists almost entirely as optional environmental storytelling. Unlike the cryptids or Bigfoot, which rely on rumor and obscure triggers, the Infinity 8 Killer is fully confirmed in the game world. However, the killer is never directly encountered in the narrative, leaving players to piece together the story from environmental clues, audio logs, and the bodies themselves. This design makes the Infinity 8 Killer uniquely immersive, as it transforms the player from a passive observer into a forensic detective tasked with reconstructing a criminal mind through fragmented evidence. The name Infinity 8 Killer originates from the recurring visual motif of the number 8, sometimes scrawled near crime scenes, other times linked by investigators' notes. While the game does not explicitly state the meaning of the symbol, it is often interpreted as a signature left by the killer, suggesting a psychological compulsion and a meticulous approach. This aligns with real-world serial killer profiling, where perpetrators frequently leave consistent symbols or marks to assert control, taunt authorities, or establish a personal mythology. In Grand Theft Auto V, the Infinity 8 Killer is primarily associated with rural and semi-rural areas, such as the outlying regions of Sandy Shores, the Grand Senora Desert, and remote backroads, creating a sense of isolation and vulnerability. The choice of location also mirrors the game's design philosophy. The killer exists where the player is less likely to be distracted by scripted missions, reinforcing the horror of encountering a crime scene in a world that otherwise feels like an open, controllable sandbox. Evidence of the Infinity 8 Killer is scattered across the map in the form of abandoned campsites, mutilated corpses, and cryptic writings. These locations are usually remote and carefully constructed, often featuring audio cues like distant sirens, animal noises, or ambient wind, which heighten the feeling of unease. The victims themselves are found in varying states, from bodies tied. The pattern of the murders suggests escalation over time, both in the number of victims and in the complexity of the crime scenes, indicating an evolution of the killer's methodology, an element that fuels fan speculation about motive, background, and even possible identity. One of the most compelling aspects of the Infinity 8 Killer mystery, Grand Theft Auto V forces the player to synthesize the information, effectively turning exploration into a detective exercise rather than a combat or mission challenge. The environmental storytelling extends to the terrain itself. Certain murder sites feature symbolic elements, trees marked with scratches resembling the infinity symbol, rocks stacked in geometric patterns, and trails leading from one victim to another. These motifs suggest a killer with a compulsive or ritualistic mindset, someone who not only murders but also stages each scene with intent. This level of detail is unusual for a sandbox game, where most violence is random or mission-driven. The Infinity 8 Killer's scenes demand attention to pattern recognition, spatial reasoning, and environmental analysis, creating an experience closer to interactive horror than open-world action. Theories about the Infinity 8 Killer's identity proliferate within the fan community. Some suggest that he is a former criminal operating in isolation, someone who intentionally hides from law enforcement while leaving taunting clues. Others argue that he is a supernatural or mythic figure, possibly connected to the occult or the broader mythological elements in Grand Theft Auto V, such as UFOs, Bigfoot, and the Beast. This interpretation is fueled by the surreal nature of some crime scenes, where bodies appear to be arranged in geometrically improbable ways or are found in locations that are otherwise inaccessible. Another popular theory proposes that the Infinity 8 Killer is tied to the fictional in-game media industry, inspired by the tendency of the game to critique sensationalism, conspiracy culture, and the glamorization of crime. In this reading, the killer's existence is partially performative, designed to leave behind a narrative for observers rather than to be directly engaged. Unlike typical open-world enemies, the Infinity 8 killer is never encountered directly, which has amplified speculation. There are no missions in which the player confronts the killer, no cutscenes revealing a final showdown, and no gameplay sequences that allow the killer to be neutralized. This absence transforms the Infinity 8 killer from a simple antagonist into a permanent, almost mythological presence within Los Santos and Blaine County. It also mirrors the design of classic serial killer fiction, where the true horror comes not from combat but from the sense of unseen threat. The idea that at any moment, a monster could appear just beyond the player's perception. The placement of bodies and clues also encourages community collaboration. For years, players documented coordinates, photographed corpses, and cataloged symbols, creating online databases to track the killer's movements. These collaborative investigations have generated meta-theories, including the notion that the killer's crimes form a giant, map-wide pattern resembling the infinity symbol when viewed from above, though this has never been confirmed. Others speculate that clues hidden in murals, graffiti, and radio chatter hint at a larger backstory involving corruption, ritual, or personal vendetta. The fact that these theories remain unresolved is part of the enduring appeal. The Infinity 8 killer exists as both narrative content and social mystery, allowing players to become participants in a detective exercise that stretches beyond the game itself. Ultimately, the Infinity 8 killer represents a unique form of storytelling in Grand Theft Auto V. The character exists at the intersection of environmental horror, detective work, and emergent player myth. By providing only fragmentary evidence, the game transforms ordinary exploration into an exercise in pattern recognition and imagination. Players become investigators, piecing together the psychology, methodology, and possible identity of a killer who can never be confronted directly. The Infinity 8 killer's enduring cultural significance lies not in what is explicitly shown, but in what is implied, a shadowed, ritualistic presence that haunts the player's perception of Los Santos long after missions are complete, illustrating how open-world design can create horror and mystery without ever requiring direct combat or scripted encounters. The Infinity 8 killer mystery in Grand Theft Auto V is one of the game's most eerie and fully constructed Easter eggs. It stands out because, unlike most open-world lore that consists of vague rumors or ambiguous sightings, the Infinity 8 killer is explicitly referenced through multiple pieces of environmental storytelling scattered across the state of San Andreas. The mystery is woven into newspaper clippings, graffiti, rhymes scrawled on rocks, and even underwater grave sites, and it forms a fragmented narrative about a psychotic serial killer known as Merle Abrahams, whose crimes took place years before the player's story begins. Despite this extensive evidence, the culprit himself is never seen in the game world. Instead, his presence is reconstructed through the clues he left behind. Merle Abrahams, according to in-game sources, lived in Sandy Shores, Blaine County, and developed a severe obsession with the number 8, claiming that 8 is just infinity stood up. The local newspaper, the Sonora Beacon, reports that he was suspected of abducting and murdering 8 joggers, all young males, and was eventually apprehended and held in Bolingbrook Penitentiary. However, he never confessed to the murders and died in custody before a trial could take place. No bodies were initially found until the player investigates the clues Abrahams left behind. The Infinity 8 killer mystery effectively functions as a self-guided detective quest, one that is not part of any main story mission, but unfolds only if the player chooses to explore and connect the environmental hints. The first major clue comes from the newspaper clipping inside a rundown shack in Sandy Shores, which tells of Abraham's death and the linked disappearances years earlier. Nearby, the remains of his burnt-out home bear graffiti such as, "There will be 8, and 8 is just infinity stood up." phrases that reflect his obsession and hint at the number of victims. Inside the house, players can also find a pair of shoes hanging from the ceiling and various unsettling details, like jars that seem to contain body parts and numerous number 8 symbols painted around the site. As the player explores further, they'll come across riddles carved into large white rocks in the Senora National Park. One such rhyme states, "1 is done. 2 was fun. 3 tried to run. 4 called mom. 5's not alive. 6 is nix. 7's in heaven. 8 won't wait." This rhyme grimly enumerates the suspected victims, though it is phrased in a nursery rhyme-like cadence that makes it all the more disturbing. A second grouping of rocks in the same area has another message that seems to taunt investigators, implying the killer will leave behind signs but not be caught. These rock inscriptions serve as foreshadowing for the deeper clue hidden in the state. The most critical clue is found inside Bolingbroke Penitentiary. If the player enters the recreation yard near cell block 9A, they will find a message on a wall that reads, "Where water meets land and fire once spewed forth, there the infinite 8 shall stay until I return." Beneath this eerie phrase is a crude map sketch. Players interpreted the riddle and map together as a reference to the archipelago north of Paleto Bay, a cluster of small islands off the northeastern edge of the map near where land meets sea. The phrase, "fire once spewed forth," is generally taken to mean a volcanic area or simply to deepen the mystery, but the map sketch makes the intended location unmistakable. To solve the Infinity 8 killer mystery, players generally follow these steps. Read the newspaper clipping in the derelict shack in Sandy Shores to learn the killer's name and background. Visit Merle Abraham's burned-down house and examine the graffiti and number 8 symbols, internal messages, and the disturbing artifacts like shoes. Find the numbered rock rhymes in the Senora National Park, which enumerate the victims and hint at the killer's mentality. Travel to Bolingbroke Penitentiary, enter the yard near cell block 9A, and read the cryptic phrase and sketch linking the murders to a distant location. Bring scuba gear or dive underwater north of Paleto Bay to locate the 8 corpses bound in plastic wrap on the seafloor. The 8 bodies are indeed waiting in the water around the archipelago north of Paleto Bay. They are bound in burial wrappings and lie on the ocean floor, arranged in a loose grouping that seems deliberate. The game does not allow any direct interaction with the corpses. They are purely visual evidence of the Infinity murders. Interestingly, while the in-game report mentions male joggers, the bodies appear to be female models wrapped in cloth when examined via mods or certain viewing tools, which has sparked speculation about whether these bodies represent the 8 joggers or perhaps another set of victims entirely. Some players theorize that this discrepancy could be a developer oversight or related to another fan theory about copycat killers, though nothing official confirms either theory. There are additional environmental details that add texture to the Infinity 8 killer mystery. For instance, around Sandy Shores and the nearby Yellow Jack Inn, players have reported bloody footprints and random graffiti such as "Go away Merle Abrahams, you're a wrong un" on the side of the killer's house, which some interpret as taunts from other characters in the world who feared or despised him. While these aren't necessary to solve the mystery, they contribute to the atmosphere and the sense of a lived-in world reacting to the killer's legacy. The mystery has also inspired numerous player theories and community speculation. One popular belief is that the killer might still be at large despite reports of his death, suggested by his final message that the infinite 8 shall stay until I return, implying a return someday. Others point to the incongruity of female bodies instead of male joggers as either an intentional subversion or an unexplained layer, possibly hinting at multiple serial killers or mistaken identity. Some players even connect the number 8 obsession and motifs to other Easter eggs elsewhere in the game, though these theories remain speculative. What is clear from the evidence is that the Infinity 8 killer subplot is one of the most intricately constructed bits of lore in Grand Theft Auto V, relying on environmental storytelling, cryptic clues, and hidden locations to let players piece together the killer's crimes on their own. While there is no direct reward or narrative resolution from solving the Infinity 8 killer mystery, no cutscene, no trophy, no confrontation, the act of discovering the 8 bodies and decoding the clues provides its own eerie conclusion. The story of Merle Abrahams remains one of the most chilling examples of how Grand Theft Auto V uses its open world to tell dark, ambient tales, inviting players not just to complete missions, but to uncover the hidden histories buried beneath the surface of San Andreas.